The rain over Manhattan came down in silver sheets, blurring the city lights as Madison Clark staggered toward the entrance of the plaza. Her coat clung to her like a second skin, heavy with water, heavy with everything she could no longer hold inside. One hand pressed against her swollen belly, the other gripping the envelope that had changed her entire world in a single morning. A medical warning. A risk to her pregnancy, a plea from her doctor to rest, to reduce stress, to protect herself. But how do you protect yourself when the man you're married to is the very source of your destruction? Through the revolving doors, she caught the sound before she saw the seen laughter. Not just any laughter, Brandon's. The same warm, deep laugh he used to give her. Now twisted, sharpened, directed at someone else, Madison froze. A couple stepped into view. Brandon Hale, her husband, his hand securely wrapped around the waist of a woman in a red silk dress. Younger. Carefree. Shamelessly leaning into him as if she'd earned the right. Madison knew she shouldn't be here. She had come only to show him the medical report, to tell him she needed support, not arguments. But instead she stood there, dripping rainwater onto the marble floor, staring at the man who had slowly erased her until there was barely anything left to recognize. Brandon's eyes finally met hers. For a moment, he looked startled, then annoyed, then cold. "What are you doing here, Madison?" he asked sharply, as if she were an inconvenience, not his wife carrying his child. The red-dress woman smirked, whispering something into his ear that made him chuckle again. Madison's throat tightened. Her breath shook. The envelope slipped from her fingers and landed between them on the polished floor. Brandon didn't bend to pick it up. He didn't even reach for her. Behind her, footsteps approached slowly, deliberately, as if someone had been watching her fall apart from the moment she walked in. Madison turned and found herself staring into the eyes of a man she never expected to see again. Madison couldn't remember the last time she had slept through the night. Even before discovering Brandon's affair, her life had been a constant, quiet erosion, like water slowly wearing down stone. People always said she was lucky, married to a rising real estate star, living in a Fifth Avenue penthouse, driving a spotless white Mercedes she rarely touched. But no one saw the truth beneath the polished surface. No one saw how small her world had become. Before Brandon, Madison had been a force, an award-winning architect with a vision for sustainable housing, a woman whose designs had made investors pause, then lean in. She once walked into boardrooms with her sketches tucked under her arm, confident she could change the skyline. She built models late at night with music playing and windows open, imagining a future shaped by her hands. But Brandon didn't like that. Not at first, maybe, but certainly later. He said it in subtle ways. "You work too much. I make enough for both of us. You don't need to prove anything." Then he began declining meetings without telling her, turning down offers on her behalf, steering clients toward other firms because it was better for her to rest. And Madison, exhausted from trying to reconcile love with ambition, slowly folded herself into his expectations. She let him take over the company's public face, then its finances, then her role entirely. Soon, her dreams lived only on a dusty shelf in her studio, buried under folders she no longer had the courage to open. Pregnancy had only tightened the cage. Each doctor's appointment left her more aware of the life depending on her and of the man who wasn't. She had hoped Brandon would soften, return to the version of him she married. Instead, he became sharper, colder, almost irritated by her fragility. "You're too emotional," he snapped whenever she tried to talk. "Every pregnant woman feels tired. Stop dramatizing. And the worst of all, if you can't handle stress, maybe architecture wasn't for you in the first place. These are." Those words had stuck to her ribs like glass. Tonight, standing in the doorway of the plaza, seeing him with another woman, everything finally aligned. It wasn't that she wasn't enough. It was that he never intended to let her be. The ache in her chest returned as she steadied herself, her breath uneven. She had spent years shrinking so he could shine, years giving so he could take. Behind her, the footsteps grew closer. And the man approaching her now was someone who once believed she deserved the entire skyline she dreamed of. The city glowed like a living jewel as Madison stepped backward, distancing herself from the bright lobby lights of the plaza. Manhattan always seemed to shimmer with a kind of untouchable elegance, towering buildings that sliced into the night sky, taxis gliding through puddles like gold streaks, the soft hum of wealth vibrating beneath every step. Tonight, the world felt especially sharp, every detail clearer than she wanted it to be. It was as if the city chose this moment to remind her just how small she had become inside a life that once thrilled her. She used to love this part of Manhattan. Fifth Avenue had been her place of inspiration back when she walked the streets, sketching silhouettes of buildings. She admired the clean lines of modern hotels, the classical arches of older structures, the warm lights glowing from rooftop bars. It was here she had once imagined opening her own firm, a studio filled with glass desks, blueprint rolls, and ideas that would catch the attention of investors with a single glance. But now the city she adored felt indifferent, cold, almost cruel. A black Mercedes rolled up to the curb, sleek and polished, its headlights scattering across the rain-soaked pavement. It reminded her of her own car, the one Brandon insisted she barely drive because he didn't trust her, pregnancy fatigue. He even hired a driver without asking, claiming it was for her safety. But really, Madison knew it was just one more way to control her movements. Inside the plaza, the chandeliers glistened like galaxies scattered above polished marble floors. Guests in tailored suits and designer gowns drifted through the lobby, laughing as if nothing in the world could touch them. The smell of expensive perfume, warm pastries from the cafe, and fresh flowers from tall vases blended into a scent Madison had always associated with success. Yet standing here now, she felt painfully out of place. Her hair was frizzed from the rain, her coat clung to her like a second skin, and her swollen belly made every breath a conscious effort. She must have looked like a ghost wandering into the wrong world. A group of businessmen brushed past her, barely noticing her existence. One commented on a deal closing, another discussed a private flight leaving from Teterboro. Their voices sounded distant, muffled by the ache pulsing through her chest. For a fleeting second, Madison wished she could disappear into the crowd, become another face with a purpose, with a life that wasn't collapsing. She turned slightly, trying to steady her breathing, when she heard it again, those measured footsteps behind her. And this time, Madison felt certain the man walking toward her wasn't a stranger at all. Brandon Hale wasn't always the villain in Madison's story. In the early days, he was magnetic, sharp suit, sharper smile, the kind of man who could walk into any room and make people rearrange themselves around him. Investors loved him. Socialites admired him. Journalists compared him to the next generation of New York real estate prodigies. His rise was fast, effortless, almost suspiciously smooth. But Madison never questioned it. She believed in him the way only someone in love could. It wasn't until she stepped into his world fully that she began to see the cracks. Brandon thrived on admiration, not affection. He loved being needed, not being known. And most of all, he loved control. At first, it was little things, choosing her outfits for business events, rewriting her project proposals, dismissing architects she respected. He framed it as guidance, support, protection. Madison convinced herself he simply wanted the best for her. But the truth was far less noble. The more Brandon rose, the smaller he wanted her to be. He couldn't risk her shining too brightly, not when he needed every spotlight on him. When Madison got pregnant, he treated it less like a blessing and more like an inconvenience. He stopped attending doctor appointments, citing meetings. He complained about how emotional she had become. He criticized her for resting, then criticized her for working. His hypocrisy was so polished, so consistent, that she began to question her own instincts. And then came the assistant, Nina Brooks, 27, ambitious, stunning in the deliberate, calculated way of someone who knew exactly what effect she had on men like Brandon. She joined his company as a marketing strategist. Within weeks, she was on every business trip, every late-night work session, every weekend, team-building retreat. Madison had once asked, gently, if their closeness was appropriate. Brandon laughed, offended. "Don't be insecure, Mads. It's unflattering." 3 months later, Madison found Nina's perfume on his shirt. When she confronted him, he didn't deny it. He simply turned it on her hormones, her stress, her so-called overreactions. He said she was imagining things, that pregnancy made women dramatic. He said if she focused more on her health and less on paranoia, their marriage would be fine. And Madison, tired, hurting, afraid of losing everything she had invested in this life, let the argument die. But standing here now, soaking from the rain, watching Brandon with Nina draped on his arm. Something inside her finally snapped clean and irreversible. Because Brandon wasn't even hiding anymore. He wasn't trying to pretend. He wasn't afraid of losing her. Until the moment he realized the man approaching Madison was someone he should have feared all along. The moment Brandon noticed Madison standing there, drenched from the storm and trembling from exhaustion, his expression twisted not with guilt, but irritation, as if her presence had inconvenienced his carefully crafted evening. Nina, in her red silk dress, leaned closer into him, her manicured hand sliding possessively along his arm. Her smirk was small but sharp, like the tip of a blade pressed behind a smile. "Madison," Brandon said, his voice low but dripping with annoyance. "You shouldn't be here. Shouldn't be here." As if it wasn't her marriage, too. As if she hadn't spent years supporting him through every deal, every sleepless night, every success he claimed as solely his. Madison swallowed hard, fighting the urge to cry. She wasn't here to beg. She wasn't here to accuse. She had come with the medical report, hoping that somewhere beneath the arrogance and ambition, the man she once loved would care. Just enough to listen. Just enough to show a sliver of humanity. But Brandon didn't even look at the envelope on the floor. Instead, he glanced down at her belly with a detached indifference. "You stressed yourself into another episode again?" he said, loud enough for several guests to hear. "I told you to stop overreacting. It's embarrassing." A small crowd had gathered, subtle but present. Wealthy men in tailored suits, women in glittering gowns, hotel staff pretending not to stare. Madison felt their eyes on her, some sympathetic, others hungry for gossip. Her cheeks burned. Nina chuckled, tilting her head. "She probably thought you were alone, Brandon. Poor thing. T-1000. We're receiving." The humiliation hit Madison square in the chest. Her breath hitched, her vision blurred. She wanted to run, to disappear, to melt into the marble floor and escape the spectacle she had unwillingly become. "I needed to talk to you," Madison whispered, clutching her coat tighter around her. "It's important." Brandon scoffed. "Everything is important with you lately. Drama after drama. I'm in the middle of a business dinner. We'll talk tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" He said it like an order, like she was an inconvenience. A task he'd deal with once he finished having a good time. Madison bent down slowly, knees shaking, to pick up the medical report. Before she could reach it, Nina stepped forward deliberately, her stiletto heel landing right on the envelope, grinding it into the floor. "Oh," she said sweetly. "Was this important?" The laughter around them surged. Madison felt something inside her break, quiet, clean, irreversible. And in the same moment, a deep voice behind her said firmly, "Step away from her." Brandon turned, and his smugness vanished the moment he saw who was standing there. Madison felt the room tilt as Brandon's voice rose behind her, words slicing the air with the precision of a man who had perfected the art of belittling. She didn't need to turn around to know he was furious. Furious she had shown up, furious someone had seen him, furious she existed outside the narrative he tried to control. But his anger barely registered anymore. What she felt instead was exhaustion, a deep, bone-heavy weariness that no amount of rest could cure. Her body shook as she stepped away from Nina's heel. Away from the crushed envelope, away from the eyes, watching like she was a scene unfolding for their entertainment. She needed air. Madison pushed through the crowd, her hand gripping the marble column for support as she staggered toward the exit. The lobby lights blurred. Her chest tightened, squeezing around her lungs like a fist. She heard someone call her name, maybe Brandon, maybe a stranger, but the sound drifted away like it belonged to another universe. Rain slapped against the glass doors as she stumbled outside. Cold wind hit her immediately, stealing her breath. She pressed a hand to her belly, whispering, "It's okay. I'm okay. We're okay." Though none of it felt true. Her vision tunneled. The city lights smeared like wet paint. She leaned against a stone pillar, trying to gather herself, but her body had reached its limit. Stress, humiliation, pregnancy, everything collided at once. A sharp pain shot across her abdomen. She gasped, doubling forward, fingers clawing at the air for balance. Her knees buckled, and the world fractured into fragments, voices, footsteps, neon reflections swirling in rain puddles. Inside the lobby, Brandon didn't move. Not at first. Nina tugged his arm, whispering something. He glanced toward the glass doors. annoyance flickering across his face. "She's doing this for attention," he muttered. "She always does." The sentence twisted like a knife. Madison collapsed onto the cold stone steps, rain soaking through her hair, her coat, her skin. A passing couple halted, startled, but they hesitated, unsure whether to intervene or assume help would come from inside. Her breaths came shallow and uneven. She blinked rapidly, fighting consciousness, but the edges of her vision were dissolving. A shadow moved toward her through the rain's steady strides, purposeful, unhesitating. A hand reached for her shoulder, firm but careful. "Madison," a deep voice said. "Hey, look at me." She lifted her head weakly, rain dripping from her lashes. And there, kneeling beside her, was the last man Brandon ever expected to cross paths with tonight. Rain pooled around Madison as she forced her eyes to focus on the shadow kneeling before her. A face slowly sharpened through the downpour, familiar, steady, impossibly out of place in this moment of total collapse. Noah Whitmore, the billionaire developer whose name filled financial headlines and architectural journals alike, crouched beside her with a calm intensity that cut through the chaos. "Madison, can you hear me?" he asked, brushing a wet strand of hair from her cheek. His touch was gentle but sure, as if grounding her back into her own body. She blinked, dazed. "Noah?" Her voice cracked. What are you doing here?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he draped his coat over her trembling shoulders, shielding her from the rain. The coat was warm, heavy, smelling faintly of cedar and something clean, something safe. Then he slipped an arm under her back, helping her sit upright with slow, deliberate care. "I was meeting someone inside," Noah finally said. "Saw you fall the moment I walked out." Inside. Of course, men like Noah didn't simply appear. They were expected, welcomed, anticipated. Madison would have recognized him anywhere, even without the tabloid stories. Years ago, he'd toured one of her exhibition projects and told her she had the kind of mind that could redesign a city. It was praise she had held on to long after Brandon dismissed her talent. Now here he was, kneeling on cold stone steps to help her, while her own husband hadn't bothered to take a single step outside. A doorman hovered uncertainly nearby. "Sir, should I call an ambulance?" Noah glanced at Madison. "Do you want one?" She shook her head weakly. "Just need a minute." Noah nodded, respecting her choice instantly, something Brandon had never done. Behind them, through the rain-streaked glass doors, Brandon finally approached. His expression wasn't fear or worry, but irritation. He stepped outside just far enough to avoid getting wet. "Mads, get up," Brandon snapped. "You're causing a scene." Noah's head lifted slowly, sharply, his eyes locked onto Brandon with a coldness that made the air feel heavier. "A scene?" Noah repeated. "Your wife collapsed." "She's overreacting," Brandon shot back. "She does this." The words punched the air out of Madison's lungs. Noah's jaw tightened. "What she's doing," he said evenly, "is surviving something you clearly don't understand." Brandon stepped closer, squaring his shoulders. "Back off, Whitmore. This is my wife." Noah didn't move. "That's interesting," he said softly, dangerously, "considering you haven't acted like a husband once tonight." And for the first time, Brandon's confidence slipped just slightly, but enough for Madison to feel the shift. Noah didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm, unshakable presence alone was enough to make Brandon falter. Madison felt the shift, like the air finally recognized the truth she had been too afraid to speak. Brandon wasn't the man who protected her. He was the man she needed protection from. "Noah, I'm fine," Madison whispered, though her voice trembled. "Really, I just need to breathe." Noah leaned closer, his hand steady at her back. "You don't have to pretend with me." His tone wasn't patronizing. It wasn't pitying. It was grounding, like someone offering a lifeline without demanding anything in return. Brandon scoffed. "Unbelievable. You collapse on hotel steps, and now you're playing damsel in distress for him? Get up, Madison. Don't make this worse." The words stung, slicing through her even after everything. Noah heard them too. He exhaled slowly, a restrained kind of anger tightening his jaw. "She's 6 months pregnant," Noah said, "and you're yelling instead of helping." Brandon's nostrils flared. "This is none of your business." "It became my business the moment you chose to watch her fall instead of catching her," Noah replied. A few passers-by lingered near the awning, watching the exchange. Even the valet paused mid-motion, unsure whether to intervene. Madison could feel the humiliation pressing deeper, but also something unfamiliar rising beneath it. A spark. A reminder of who she used to be. Her breath shuddered as she tried to stand. Noah immediately supported her, guiding her with slow, deliberate care. Brandon didn't move to help. Instead, he crossed his arms as if she were inconveniencing him by existing. "You need to stop dramatizing everything," Brandon said. "Come inside. We'll talk when you're calm." Madison steadied herself, placing a hand over her stomach. Calm, that word again. As if silence was the only acceptable way for her to suffer. She looked up at Brandon, and for the first time, she truly saw him. Not the charming visionary he portrayed to the world, but the small, brittle man behind the mask. The man who used control as love. The man who used cruelty as truth. "No," Madison said softly. Brandon blinked. "No." "What?" "No. I'm not going anywhere with you." The rain softened, turning into a mist around them. Noah's hand hovered protectively near hers, ready if she needed him, but not assuming she did. Brandon stepped toward her. "Madison, don't start." But she didn't back down, because at that exact moment, Madison realized she wasn't the one who should be afraid of losing him. He should be afraid of losing her. Madison's refusal landed between them like a crack in the pavement, small at first, but destined to split everything wide open. Brandon stared at her, as if he couldn't comprehend the meaning of the word. His wife wasn't allowed to say no. Not to him. Not ever. "What did you just say?" he demanded, stepping forward again. Madison straightened her spine, her breath still shaky but her voice steadier than she felt. "I said no, I'm not going with you." Brandon let out a low laugh, the kind he used when he felt cornered but wanted to appear amused. "Mads, you're upset. You always get dramatic when you're overwhelmed. Come inside before you embarrass us both." There it was embarrassment. His true priority. Noah subtly shifted, positioning himself just enough to stand between them without making a scene. "She's not dramatic," he said calmly. "She's exhausted, and she needs space." Brandon glared at him. "You don't get to speak for my wife." "I'm not speaking for her," Noah replied, eyes narrowing slightly. "I'm listening to her." "You should try it." A flicker of something harsh crossed Brandon's face, not guilt, but anger at being challenged. Especially by Noah Whitmore, a man whose influence overshadowed his own. Madison felt Brandon's resentment building, not toward her well-being, but toward his damaged pride. "You're unbelievable," Brandon snapped at her. "Running outside in the rain, collapsing, making a spectacle." "I didn't collapse on purpose," Madison said quietly. "You didn't prevent it either," Brandon retorted. "And now you have Whitmore babysitting you like you're some fragile little—" "Fragile?" Madison interrupted. The word burned. "You think this is about weakness?" Brandon opened his mouth, but she continued, her voice trembling with conviction. "I walked in here to tell you something important. Something about the baby, about my health. But you couldn't be bothered to look at me. You were too busy laughing with her." Nina shifted uncomfortably behind Brandon, suddenly less confident under Noah's chilling, observant gaze. "What medical thing?" Brandon asked, annoyed but curious. Madison shook her head. "It doesn't matter anymore." Brandon stepped toward her again. "Madison, don't," she said firmly. "Just don't." Her heartbeat pulsed against her ribs. The night buzzed around her like electricity, alive with everything she had been too afraid to feel. And then, suddenly, her phone vibrated inside her coat pocket. She almost ignored it until she saw the name flashing across the screen. A name that made her blood run cold. Her best friend, Clara Jensen. The woman who hadn't returned her calls in weeks. The woman Madison trusted more than anyone. The woman who should not have been texting her at this exact moment. And the message she opened shattered everything she thought she knew about betrayal. Madison's fingers trembled as she unlocked her phone. Rain dripped from her hand onto the cracked screen, blurring the notification until she wiped it with her sleeve. Clara Jensen's name stared up at her, a name that once meant comfort, trust, and 10 years of friendship. A name that had been suspiciously silent during the hardest weeks of Madison's pregnancy. She opened the message. 3 photographs loaded. Then a video. At first, her mind refused to make sense of what she was seeing. The images were grainy, taken through a restaurant window, but there was no mistaking the people in them. Clara and Brandon, sitting close, laughing, sharing drinks, leaning in the way people do when there's something intimate, something hidden between them. Madison felt the world tip sideways again, but this time not from exhaustion. It was betrayal, violent and cold, ripping through her with a force that made her breath catch. The video autoplayed before she could stop it. Clara's voice floated through the speaker's light, teasing. Madison is so distracted lately, you could tell her the sky is green and she'd believe you. Brandon laughed quietly. She's too tired to question anything I say. Clara's hand brushed his. Convenient for you, isn't it? He smirked. Let's just say her silence makes certain arrangements easier. Madison's stomach twisted. She tasted metal. This wasn't just cheating. This was coordinated, manipulated. A betrayal crafted over months by the two people who should have protected her. Behind her, Noah shifted, sensing something had shifted in her energy. Madison, what is it? She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. All she could do was stare at the screen, at Clara's smile, the smile she once trusted more than her own instincts. Brandon noticed her expression. What now? He snapped. Another one of your emotional episodes? She lifted her gaze slowly, meeting his eyes with a hollow calm. Clara texted me. For the first time tonight, Brandon's composure faltered. Just a flicker. But it was enough. Nina glanced at him sharply. Clara? Why would she? But Madison wasn't listening anymore. The pieces clicked together in her mind. Missed calls, canceled plans, Clara's sudden distance, Brandon's growing contempt. It all pointed to one truth. She had been surrounded by enemies disguised as loved ones. Noah stepped closer, protective instinct rising. Madison, show me. She handed him the phone. His jaw tightened with every passing second of the video. Then he looked up, not at her, but directly at Brandon. And the quiet, lethal promise in Noah Whitmore's eyes told Madison this night was far from over. Brandon's face drained of color as Noah lowered the phone, its screen still glowing with the evidence of betrayal. The rain settled into a soft drizzle, but the tension between the three men felt sharp enough to cut through steel. Madison stood silent, her breath shallow, her heart bruised, but finally awake. Noah spoke first. You let her collapse in the street, he said calmly, though his eyes held a storm, while you were busy sneaking around with her best friend. That's not what it looks like, Brandon said quickly. Too quickly. His voice cracked on the last word. Clara and I, she Madison, you're misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Madison repeated, her voice surprisingly steady. Brandon, the two of you met behind my back for months, and you lied. Both of you. Tu sizo, aphasie. Brandon scrubbed both hands over his face, the polished facade slipping faster than he could hold it together. It wasn't like that. She just listened. You've been difficult lately, emotional, impossible to talk to. So you talked to Clara instead of your pregnant wife? Noah snapped. Brandon ignored him, focusing solely on Madison. You pushed me away. You shut me out. You made everything stressful. And Clara, she just understood. There it was, the confession he didn't mean to give. Madison felt something inside her harden, a boundary she never realized she had the right to set. You don't get to blame me for your cheating, she said softly. Not anymore. Nina shifted uncomfortably beside Brandon, her confidence thinning. Brandon, she whispered, you told me Madison was paranoid. You never said anything about Clara. He shot her a warning look. Not now. Noah exhaled sharply, stepping closer to Madison as if ready to shield her from whatever came next. Enough, he said. She's done listening to you. Brandon turned on him, rage flaring. And who are you to interfere? You don't know anything about our marriage. I know enough, Noah replied. I know she deserves better than being manipulated by the two people she trusted most. A few hotel guests lingered near the doorway, pretending not to watch but very obviously listening. Brandon noticed, and panic flared in his eyes. His reputation mattered more to him than any relationship he claimed to protect. He grabbed Madison's arm, not hard, but firmly enough to make Noah step forward instantly. We're leaving, Brandon said. You're coming home. Now. Madison didn't flinch. Didn't waver. Instead, she pulled her arm back with a quiet strength Brandon didn't recognize. No, she said again. Something inside Brandon snapped. You think Whitmore can save you? You think he cares about you? Noah's expression barely changed. I don't need to save her, he replied. Madison's finally saving herself. And that was the moment a black SUV screeched to the curb, carrying the last person Madison expected to see tonight. The black SUV rolled to a sudden stop at the curb, its headlights cutting through the thinning rain like two harsh white blades. The door swung open before the engine even settled, and a woman in a tailored navy coat stepped out, heels clicking sharply against the pavement. Madison's breath caught. Her mother, Evelyn Clark. A woman known for her composure, her elegance, her reputation among New York's upper circles, and for the chilling disappointment she carried like a shadow. Madison had spent years trying to earn her approval, only to receive criticism disguised as advice. Tonight, however, Evelyn didn't look critical. She looked furious. Her eyes landed first on Madison, soaked, pale, trembling, then shifted to Brandon and Nina. The disapproval in her gaze hardened instantly into something colder, sharper. "Madison Rose Clark," Evelyn said, voice steady but edged. "What on earth has he done to you?" The question wasn't meant for Madison. It was a warning directed at Brandon. Brandon straightened, attempting a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Evelyn, this is a misunderstanding. Madison got emotional, that's all. I was just taking her home." Evelyn held up a hand, silencing him. "Do not finish that sentence." Nina quietly stepped back, sensing the shift in power. Evelyn moved closer to Madison, cupping her daughter's face gently, so gently it startled Madison. Her mother had never been soft, not like this. "My God," Evelyn whispered, "you're freezing." Madison felt a lump rise in her throat. It wasn't affection she expected, it was judgment. Yet tonight, her mother's anger wasn't aimed at her. It was aimed entirely at Brandon. Evelyn turned, her expression sharpening like glass. "You let my pregnant daughter collapse in the street?" Brandon stammered. "Evelyn, she didn't collapse, she made a scene." "A scene?" Evelyn repeated, each syllable colder than the last. "Brandon, if she had gone into distress, if she lost that baby, do you understand what would have happened?" Brandon said nothing. Evelyn stepped closer to him. "You've embarrassed this family for the last time." Madison blinked. Family, hers, not his. Brandon's composure fractured. "You don't know the whole story." "I know enough," Evelyn snapped. "I know the look of a woman who has been mistreated, and I know the look of a man who mistreats." His loathing. Noah, standing just behind Madison, looked at Evelyn with newfound respect. Evelyn finally turned back to her daughter. "You're not going home with him. Not tonight, not again." Brandon stepped forward, desperate. "Evelyn, you can't make that decision." "I don't need to," Evelyn said. "Madison already did." She opened the SUV door. "Come, sweetheart. Let's go." But before Madison could move, a second SUV pulled up, and the person stepping out made every nerve in her body lock in place. The second SUV screeched to a halt, with an urgency that made even Noah tense. Its tinted windows reflected the city lights like cold obsidian. The door flew open, and a tall figure stepped out, umbrella snapping open in one smooth motion. Madison's heart plummeted. Her father, Richard Clark, a man built from steel, silence, and expectations. While Evelyn enforced emotional precision, Richard enforced perfection. Growing up with him meant performing instead of feeling, achieving instead of resting, and never showing weakness. He approached with long, commanding strides, each step echoing across the wet pavement. Evelyn straightened instinctively, and even Brandon shifted uncomfortably. Richard reached Madison first. His eyes, usually unreadable, widened with a flash of something she couldn't place. Fear, relief, anger, whatever it was, it faded quickly behind his usual solid composure. "You're shaking," he said quietly. Madison blinked. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "Your mother called me." Richard turned his gaze on Brandon, assessing him like a faulty structure that needed demolition. "She said, you left my daughter outside, alone." Brandon stiffened. "It wasn't like that, sir. She came here unannounced. She tends to exaggerate things when she's..." "When she's what?" Richard cut in sharply. Brandon swallowed hard. "Emotional." Richard's jaw tightened. "She's pregnant, Brandon. That's not emotional, that's biology." Evelyn folded her arms, unapologetically pleased that her husband had taken her side for once. Richard stepped even closer to Brandon. "You should have taken her home immediately." Brandon opened his mouth, but Richard wasn't finished. "And you're lucky I wasn't here to see you standing beside." His eyes flicked to Nina. Nina dropped her gaze, cheeks flushing. Brandon's voice dropped to a strained whisper. "This is a private matter." "No," Richard said. "It stopped being private the moment you let my daughter fall." The words hit Madison harder than any blow. Her father, who rarely defended anyone, even family, had chosen her. "Dad," she whispered, overwhelmed. He looked at her again, his expression softening around the edges. "We're taking you home." Home. The word sounded strange. She didn't know where home was anymore. Noah stepped up beside her, not challenging Richard, but refusing to step back either. "She doesn't need to go somewhere she wasn't safe," he said calmly. Richard assessed him with a calculating gaze. "And you are?" "Noah Whitmore," he replied. Recognition flickered in Richard's eyes. Respect, surprise, something else he hid well. "So you're the one holding her up." Noah met his gaze evenly. "Only because someone had to." A tense silence fell. And then Madison's phone buzzed again, this time with a notification that made every muscle in her body turn to ice. The vibration rattled through Madison's hand, sharp and insistent. She glanced at the screen, expecting another message from Clara, another blow she wasn't sure she could absorb. But it wasn't Clara. It was her doctor. A second vibration. Then a third. 3 back-to-back messages marked urgent. Madison's stomach tightened. Rain suddenly felt colder on her skin. Evelyn noticed the shift in her expression immediately. "Sweetheart, what is it?" Madison opened the first message. "Madison, your test results came back. I need you to go to the hospital immediately." Her pulse quickened. The second message loaded. "This is not optional. You are showing early signs of preeclampsia. You must limit stress and be monitored tonight." A ringing sensation filled her ears. She opened the third. "If symptoms worsen dizziness, abdominal pain, you must not wait. Call emergency services." Right now, her breath caught. She had felt the dizziness, the abdominal pain. She had brushed it off as exhaustion and heartbreak. Noah saw the color drain from her face. "Madison, what does it say?" She couldn't form the words. She simply handed him the phone. His eyes scanned the screen, his expression tightening with each line. Brandon stepped closer, annoyed. "What now? More theatrics?" Noah's head snapped up. "Shut up." Brandon froze. Noah turned back to Madison, voice quieter but firm. "We're taking you in. Now." Evelyn reached for her daughter's arm. "She's going in our car." Richard nodded. "Hospital for special surgery is 10 minutes from here. Let's go." But Madison didn't move. She looked between her parents, then at Brandon, then at Noah. Her life had been splintering for months, but this was the fracture that revealed everything beneath. This wasn't about betrayal anymore, or humiliation, or pride. This was about survival. Hers and her baby's. Brandon forced a smile that didn't hide the panic creeping into his features. "See, this is exactly why you shouldn't get worked up. You're making yourself sick." Madison stared at him. He still didn't understand. He still thought this was drama, an inconvenience he would smooth over later with charm and excuses. Noah stepped closer. "Madison, who do you want to go with?" The question pierced the air. Her parents waited. Noah waited. Even Brandon waited, though for all the wrong reasons. Madison drew a slow breath, the weight of every choice pressing against her ribs. And then she finally spoke the words that would change the entire direction of the night. "I'm not going with any of you. I'm not going with any of you." The words slipped from Madison's lips with a calm she didn't feel, but desperately needed. The entire group, her parents, Noah, Brandon, even Nina, froze as if Manhattan itself had stopped breathing. Evelyn blinked. "Madison, darling, you don't mean—" "I do," she whispered. "For once, I need space to think, to breathe, to decide without being pulled in every direction." Richard frowned, his protective instincts rising. "You need medical monitoring. This is not the time for independence." Brandon scoffed. "She can't go alone. She needs supervision." Noah stepped forward, his voice steady. "She's not saying she wants to be alone. She's saying she wants to choose." As well. Madison met his eyes gratefully because he understood the one thing no one else had realized. The choice mattered more than the destination. For months, decisions had been made around her, over her, against her. Tonight, she needed one decision that belonged entirely to her. She took a slow breath. "I'm calling my own ride." Brandon grabbed a fistful of air, desperate to pull control back. "Absolutely not. I'm your husband." "No," Madison said, her voice sharper now. "You're not my husband tonight, not anymore." Noah's expression softened, but he didn't move toward her. He respected the distance she needed. Her parents exchanged a look, fear mixed with guilt, realizing too late that their daughter had been carrying the burden alone for far too long. A lone taxi rolled by, splashing water onto the curb. Madison stepped toward the street, her coat still damp, her hands trembling but determined. "Madison," Brandon called after her, "you're being irrational. It's Mashins on the forest." She turned around slowly. "That's the last time you get to call me that." He faltered, stunned by the strength in her voice. She lifted her phone again, not to call her parents, not to call Brandon, not even to call Noah. Instead, she dialed the number saved under a label she hadn't touched in years. Independent Transport Service, a private medical car program she once signed up for during her architectural fieldwork days. Her voice barely wavered. "Yes, I need transport to the hospital. As soon as possible." She hung up and finally allowed herself a moment to steady her breathing. Evelyn touched her arm gently. "We'll follow behind you." Madison shook her head. "Not tonight, please." For the first time, her mother stepped back. A soft hum approached a black medical sedan, pulling up to the curb. Madison reached for the door handle, but before she could get inside, a breathless hotel staff member rushed out, shouting her name with urgency that froze her in place. "Miss Clark, Miss Clark." The hotel staff member sprinted across the slick pavement, nearly slipping as he reached her. Madison froze, with her hand still on the car door. Everyone turned. Noah, her parents, even Brandon, drawn by the urgency in the man's voice. He bent over, breathless. "You dropped this inside the lobby. I think it's important." In his trembling hands was a thick, white envelope, the kind used for legal documents. Madison frowned. She hadn't brought anything except the medical report, and that was still crushed under Nina's heel. "I didn't drop this," Madison said quietly. The staff member shook his head. "It has your name on it. A courier delivered it 20 minutes ago. We tried to find you, but you were already outside." A chill ran through her. She took the envelope carefully. Her fingers brushed over the front, her full name typed in bold, clean print. Madison Rose Clark Hale. Her heart thudded once, hard. She recognized the handwriting on the back flap. Her attorney, a woman she hadn't spoken to in months. A woman who only contacted clients in extreme circumstances. Richard stepped closer. "Madison, what is that?" She didn't answer. With trembling fingers, she tore the flap open. Inside were several documents clipped together. The first page stole her breath. Amendment to Ownership Contract. Clark Design and Planning, LLC. Her company, the one Brandon had taken over. The one she built from the ground up. The one she thought she had lost forever. She pulled out the next page. Transfer of rights, enforced clauses, activated upon breach of agreement. Her pulse quickened. She vaguely remembered signing something like this years ago, back when she trusted Brandon implicitly and believed legal protections were merely a formality. She kept reading. Her knees nearly buckled. If Brandon committed fraud, infidelity, or mismanagement, if he compromised her professional autonomy, if he diverted company funds, if he breached marital loyalty, all ownership reverted to her. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God." Noah read the top page over Madison's shoulder. His eyes darkened with understanding. "Your attorney must have been tracking something. Someone sent her proof." Brandon lurched forward, grabbing the papers. "This is invalid. This can't be real. I never signed." He stopped. Because at the bottom of the document was his signature. Undeniable. Clear as daylight. Dated, witnessed. Nina gasped. "Brandon, you told me you never signed anything like that." He spun on her, face twisted. "Shut up." Madison lifted her head slowly, strength rising like a tide. These documents weren't just papers. They were freedom. And then the staff member spoke again, revealing one more detail that made Brandon visibly recoil. The staff member cleared his throat, shifting nervously as Brandon's fury simmered inches away from him. "There's something else," he said, glancing between Madison and the documents shaking in Brandon's grip. "The courier told me to make sure you saw the last page. He said it was important who signed it." Brandon stiffened. "Don't you dare." But Madison already snatched the papers back. Flipping to the final sheet, her breath hitched. There, beneath Brandon's signature, was the witness line. Signed by Clara Jensen, her best friend, the woman who betrayed her, the woman who had been meeting Brandon in secret. Evelyn's gasp seemed to echo across the wet pavement. Richard's face hardened into stone. Noah exhaled slowly, the pieces finally locking into place. Madison's hands trembled, but not from weakness. From clarity. Clara witnessed this, she said quietly. She knew about this agreement from the beginning. Is 40/50, 2020. Brandon lunged for the papers again. It doesn't matter. She didn't know what she was signing, and even if she did, this thing isn't enforceable. I'll have my lawyers. You can try, Noah said, stepping forward, but a witness signature in a legally notarized contract isn't something you can wish away. Brandon's eyes darted around, calculating, desperate. She tricked me. She must have set this up. She had some agenda. Madison cut him off. The only person who tricked anyone is you. Brandon opened his mouth, but she kept going, the words flowing with a steadiness she hadn't felt in months. You tried to erase me, my work, my company, my future, and Clara helped you, but you forgot one thing: every lie leaves a trail. The staff member swallowed hard. There's more. The courier said the attorney received anonymous evidence of financial irregularities in your company's accounts. Large transfers, all in your name, sir. N7. Extended. Brandon's face blanched. Nina stepped away slowly, her expression shifting from confusion to fear. Brandon, what did you do? His jaw clenched, panic rising. This is ridiculous. Someone is framing me. Probably Clara. She's jealous, unstable. But even he didn't sound convinced. Noah looked at Madison with something warm, steady, and strong. This isn't just a contract issue anymore. This is criminal. Richard nodded grimly. And if your attorney has proof, the authorities won't hesitate. Brandon backed up a step. Then another. His confidence was leaking out like air from a punctured tire. Madison didn't move. She didn't look away. She had never felt more awake, more in control, more herself. And then the staff member added quietly, the courier said the evidence came from someone inside your husband's inner circle, and that more is on the way. And it is. The words lingered in the air like smoke, thick, unsettling, impossible to ignore. Someone inside his inner circle. Brandon froze. His face shifted from confusion to fear so quickly it almost looked painful. That's impossible, he whispered, shaking his head. Everyone loyal to me has been with me for years. Evelyn crossed her arms. Loyalty is rarely what men like you think it is. Richard didn't speak, but his silence was its own judgment. Noah stepped closer to Madison, instinctively positioning himself so she wouldn't have to stand alone. But he didn't touch her. He let her choose her space, her ground, her voice. Madison stared at the envelope in her hands. For the first time, it felt like hope didn't have to be a distant shape. Maybe it was right here, unfolding, line by line. Brandon paced, running a shaky hand through his hair. Someone's trying to destroy me, he muttered. Someone inside someone I trusted someone. Nina swallowed, stepping slightly away from him. Brandon, who even has access to your accounts besides you? He hesitated. A dangerous pause. Madison caught it instantly. Brandon, she said slowly, who else signs financial authorizations with you? His eyes flickered, guilt flashing before he could hide it. Just one person. Richard's brows lowered. Who? Brandon hesitated again, like saying the name might shatter the last bit of control he had. Clara, he finally said. She helped with the internal books sometimes. Madison felt her breath leave her chest. Her best friend, her witness, her betrayer, her co-conspirator, and now possibly the whistleblower. Noah exhaled sharply. That means Clara has everything, the transfers, the diverted funds, the fake invoices. She's the one who sent it to the attorney. Brandon's voice cracked. Why would she turn on me? We were a mistake, Evelyn said sharply. One that seems to be unraveling right in front of you. Madison closed her eyes briefly, the truth crashing over her. Clara hadn't just betrayed her, she had betrayed Brandon too. Whatever twisted alliance they had built had rotted from the inside, and now Clara was trying to save herself the only way she knew how. By burning the entire structure down. Brandon stumbled back a step, shock overpowering arrogance. She set me up, he whispered. She set me up from the beginning. Madison looked at him evenly. You set yourself up. Clara just stopped protecting you." Before Brandon could respond, the hotel staff member lifted a trembling hand. "There's one last thing." The courier said Clara sent a message with the documents. Madison's breath hitched. "A message?" "Yes." The staff member swallowed. "And she said it was meant for you. He's everybody." He handed Madison a folded note. Inside, written in Clara's unmistakable handwriting, was a sentence that made Madison's knees nearly buckle. Madison unfolded the note with trembling fingers. Rain misted the paper, blurring the ink slightly, but the words remained clear, terrifyingly clear. "I'm sorry. I thought he loved me, but he only used us both. The files are just the beginning. Protect yourself. He's worse than you know." Madison's breath faltered. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. Clara's apology wasn't tender or remorseful. It read like a warning, a desperate attempt to distance herself from the explosion she had helped ignite. Noah looked over her shoulder. "Let me see." She handed it to him without speaking. Her parents leaned closer, concern etched deeply across their faces. Richard frowned. "This sounds like she's trying to escape liability." Evelyn shook her head. "No. This sounds like fear. If you can't to space." Brandon snatched the note from Noah's hand, eyes scanning each line with increasing panic. No, she wouldn't. Clara wouldn't send this. She wouldn't betray me." "Just like she wouldn't betray me?" Madison asked quietly. Brandon froze. He had no answer. Nina spoke timidly, voice barely audible. "Brandon, what did you do? What were you and Clara actually involved in?" Brandon's jaw clenched. "Nothing illegal. It was too fast, too practiced." Noah stepped closer, his expression sharpening. "That's a lie." Brandon glared. "Stay out of this." But Noah didn't. Clara wouldn't risk exposing him unless she thought she was going down too. Someone must have threatened her with evidence, or she realized Brandon planned to pin everything on her. Madison's stomach twisted. "Would you?" she asked Brandon softly. "Blame everything on her to save yourself?" He didn't answer. Silence was its own confession. The hotel staff member hesitated. "There's one more thing," the courier said. "He said Clara asked him to tell you something directly." Madison swallowed. "What?" He looked at her sympathetically. "She said, tell her the baby wasn't supposed to get caught in this." The world went still. Evelyn gasped sharply. Richard's hand balled into a fist. Noah's eyes darkened with fury. Brandon stepped back as if struck. I don't know what she means by that. She's lying. She's trying to ruin me." But Madison felt the truth settle like ice at the base of her spine. Clara knew something. Something dangerous. Something tied to Brandon's finances. And possibly to her pregnancy. Noah placed a steady hand near her back, not touching, but offering silent strength. "Madison," he said quietly, "we need to get you somewhere safe." Before she could respond, police sirens pierced the air, growing louder, closer, unmistakably heading toward them. And when the cruisers stopped directly in front of the plaza, Brandon's face went white. Red and blue lights flashed across the marble facade of the plaza, painting the soaked pavement in chaotic color. The moment the police stepped out of the cruisers, Brandon's expression collapsed into raw panic. He held up both hands, stumbling backward as if distance alone could rewrite the last hour. "This is a mistake," he stammered. "Someone set me up. I didn't do anything. I numb." "OC, it's the Bezasa." The lead officer approached, calm and unmoved. "Brandon Hale, we have a warrant for your arrest. Charges include corporate fraud, embezzlement, and violation of fiduciary duty." Gasps erupted from nearby guests. Nina covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. Madison felt her breath freeze, not in fear, but in realization. Clara's final message wasn't a threat. It was a warning, because law enforcement already had the evidence. Brandon's voice cracked. "Madison, tell them I would never risk our company, your company." She stepped forward, holding the contract amendment in her hand. Rain dotted the pages like punctuation marks to the truth. "It's not our company," Madison said softly. "It's mine." The officers took Brandon by the arms. He didn't fight. He simply stared at her, betrayed not by her actions, but by the fact that his control had finally slipped away. That she had finally slipped away. "Please," he whispered. "Don't let them." But Madison turned her face away. For the first time, she didn't feel guilt. She felt free. As he was led into the cruiser, reporters surged toward the entrance, cameras flashing wildly. Questions flew through the air about fraud, about Clara, about Madison's reclaimed company. She stood tall, rain glistening in her hair like a crown she had finally earned. Richard placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Evelyn wiped a tear she tried to hide. Noah stepped closer, voice low and warm. "You did this," he said. "Not me, not your parents. You saved yourself." Madison exhaled, her chest trembling not from fear, but from release. The medical transport car was still waiting. She moved toward it slowly, deliberately. Noah opened the door for her, but didn't guide her inside. He simply offered his hand. She took it, not out of dependence, not out of fear, but because she chose to. As she settled in, Noah leaned down, his voice just loud enough for her to hear. "When this is over," he said, "if you want a partner who builds with you, not over you, I'm here." Madison felt her heart steady, her company restored, her freedom reclaimed, her future shifting into something bright. The car pulled away from the plaza, and for the first time in years, Madison Clark moved forward without looking back. And just like that, our story comes to a close. But hey, my wonderful friends still watching right now, yes, you didn't stay until the end for no reason. Something in Madison's journey touched your heart in a way you maybe didn't expect. And that means this moment, right here, is meant for you. Life will break us open, people will betray us, doors will slam in our faces. But as Marcus Aurelius once wrote, the obstacle is the way. What hurts you is also what shapes you. What tries to silence you is often what teaches you to speak louder. Madison didn't rise because the world suddenly became kinder. She rose because she finally remembered who she was. And maybe that's your reminder, too. You deserve peace, you deserve boundaries, you deserve a life that fits the size of your soul, not the size someone else allowed you to have. So if this story moved you, healed you, or simply made you feel seen, give it a like, share it with someone who needs strength tonight, and subscribe so you don't walk this healing journey alone. Because you and I, we're building something stronger here. Something honest. Something brave. And I'm glad you're here,